And we take you live now to the U.S. House as they gavel back in for votes on 3 bills debated earlier. Live coverage here on C-SPAN.
2646. The unfinished business is the question on subpoenaing the rules and passing H.R. 2944, which the clerk will report by title.
H.R. 2944, a bill to provide for the continued performance of the functions of the United States Parole Commission and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. What person is the gentleman from Florida rise?
Ask for yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Member will record their votes by electronic device. The first electronic vote will be conducted as a 15-minute vote. Remaining electronic votes will be conducted as 5-minute votes.
The House today debated 5 bills total. They passed by voice vote 2 of them, and they've returned here for roll call votes on 3 of them. This first one is a bill that reauthorizes the U.S. Parole Commission. It's a 15-minute vote, and it'll be followed by 2 5-minute votes. That'll be it for roll call votes this evening. Special order speeches will follow that. Well, 10 days from now is the end of the fiscal year, the 2011 fiscal year, and both the House and Senate are working on a continuing resolution to fund the government well into November. We got an update on where things stand earlier today from a Capitol Hill reporter. Billy House is a staff writer for National Journal. First item, the House and Senate appear to be on conflicting paths on how to pay for disaster relief. How does that tie into whether the federal government shuts down or not on October 1st?
Well, that dispute on disaster relief is part of the discussion on the short-term CR that would take government, keep government open through November 18th. The end of the fiscal year is September 30th, and the country needs some sort of new bill to keep government operations going beyond then. No budget, of course, has been passed for the fiscal 12-year.
Well, if the House passes a continuing resolution Wednesday and the Senate adds its disaster relief bill to that, what are the prospects in the House then for that amended bill for a final product to pass?
Well, it's important to underscore that all sides are seeking to downplay the notion that we're headed for some sort of showdown or brinksmanship that we saw this spring that could force a government shutdown. But on the other hand, House Republican leaders, upset with the notion that their offsets would be taken out by the Senate and the bill would be sent back over to the House, are saying that this would be on Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's shoulders if the government were to shut down, and that, quite frankly, they don't believe there are enough votes on the House floor to pass what Harry Reid wants to do.
Well, parallel to the CR discussions, the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee has another public meeting scheduled for Thursday. Have they come to an agreement on anything yet?
No, and in fact, as we speak, and for much of Tuesday afternoon, they're over at the Library of Congress, huddled in a room still discussing broad parameters of what their talks will move ahead on. The president's stuff certainly puts a lot of new pressure on their plate. And brought a lot more attention on the notion of revenues and tax hike possibilities. But today they're meeting in private, and you're right, Thursday they have a public hearing on that very issue of revenues.
Well, there have been news stories about where these sort of new lines in the sand are being drawn about what should or shouldn't be on the negotiating table. So what do the prospects look like that the 12 members of this committee will reach an agreement?
Well, keep in mind, for this committee to pass anything, it has to be by a majority, and it's evenly divided, 6-6 on partisan lines. So drawing lines in the sand it become even more complicated when you realize if anybody does cross the aisle and does give the other side the one vote it needs to push its ideas across, that person likely won't be doing it alone. There'll have to be two. That makes it seem all the more likely that this committee either A, won't achieve its mission of finding at least $1.2 trillion in savings for the next 10 years, or will barely do that. But the idea of a great grand bargain with some of these great initiatives, various pressure groups, and even President Obama are calling for, seems like a long shot at best.
Billy House covers Congress for National Journal, and you can read his work online at nationaljournal.com. Thanks for that update.
Okay, thank you.
And just an update, too, the Joint Committee on Deficit Reduction is meeting on Thursday. We will have live coverage of that meeting, that hearing, on Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and that'll be live on C-SPAN 3 and also on C-SPAN Radio. The House is in the first of 3 votes. This is a 15-minute vote on extending authorization for the U.S. Parole Commission. 2 more 5-minute votes will follow this. Outside of Washington today in New York, the meeting of the UN General Assembly getting underway this week at the United Nations. President Obama is there, as are a number of world leaders. The Palestinians, of course, making moves towards recognition by the United Nations. The President spoke at a number of occasions today, including talking about Libya. He said the difficult days are still ahead, but the future of Libya is now in the hands of the Libyan people. He spoke at the United Nations Libya Contact Meeting on the future of Libya, and that followed the meeting with the leader of the Transnational Council of Libya. Here are the President's comments from earlier today.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary General. On behalf of us all, thank you for convening this meeting to address a task that must be the work of all of us, supporting the people of Libya as they build a future that is free and democratic and prosperous. And I want to thank President Jalil for his remarks and for all that he and Prime Minister Jibril have done to help Libya reach this moment. To all the heads of state, to all the countries represented here who have done so much over the past several months to ensure this day could come, I want to say thank you as well. Today, the Libyan people are writing a new chapter in the life of their nation. After 4 decades of darkness, they can walk the streets free from a tyrant. They are making their voices heard in new newspapers and on radio and television, in public squares, and on personal blogs. They're launching political parties and civil groups to shape their own destiny and secure their universal rights. And here at the United Nations, the new flag of a free Libya now flies among the community of nations. Make no mistake, credit for the liberation of Libya belongs to the people of Libya. It was Libyan men and women and children who took to the streets in peaceful protest, who faced down the tanks and endured the snipers' bullets. It was Libyan fighters, often outgunned and outnumbered, who fought pitched battles, town by town, block by block. It was Libyan activists in the underground, in chat rooms, in mosques, who kept a revolution alive even after some of the world had given up hope. It was Libyan women and girls who hung flags and smuggled weapons to the front. It was Libyans from countries around the world, including my own, who rushed home to help, even though they too risked brutality and death. It was Libyan blood that was spilled, and Libya's sons and daughters who gave their lives. And on that August day, after all that sacrifice, after 42 long years, it was Libyans who pushed their dictator from power. At the same time, Libya is a lesson in what the international community can achieve when we stand together as one. I said at the beginning of this process, we cannot and should not intervene every time there is an injustice in the world. Yet it's also true that there are times where the world could have and should have summoned the will to prevent the killing of innocents on a horrific scale. And we are forever haunted by the atrocities that we did not prevent and the lives that we did not save. But this time was different. This time we, through the United Nations, found the courage and the collective will to act. When the old regime unleashed a campaign of terror, threatening to roll back the democratic tide sweeping the region, we acted as United Nations, and we acted swiftly, broadening sanctions, imposing an arms embargo. The United States led the effort to pass a historic resolution at the Security Council authorizing all necessary measures to protect the Libyan people. And when the civilians of Benghazi were threatened with a massacre, we exercised that authority. Our international coalition stopped the regime in its tracks and saved countless lives and gave the Libyan people the time and the space to prevail. Important, too, is how this effort succeeded. Thanks to the leadership and contributions of many countries. The United States was proud to play a decisive role, especially in the early days, and then in a supporting capacity. But let's remember that it was the Arab League that appealed for action. It was the world's most effective alliance, NATO, that's led a military coalition of nearly 20 nations. It's our European allies, especially the United Kingdom and France and Denmark and Norway, that conducted the vast majority of airstrikes protecting rebels on the ground. It was Arab states who joined the coalition as equal partners. And it's been the United Nations and neighboring countries, including Tunisia and Egypt, that have cared for the Libyans in the urgent humanitarian effort that continues today. This is how the international community should work in the 21st century. More nations bearing the responsibility and the costs of meeting global challenges. In fact, this is the very purpose of this United Nations. So every nation represented here today can take pride in the innocent lives we saved and in helping Libyans reclaim their country. It was the right thing to do. Now, even as we speak, remnants of the old regime continue to fight. Difficult days are still ahead. But one thing is clear. The future of Libya is now in the hands of the Libyan people. For just as it was Libyans who tore down the old order, it will be Libyans who build their new nation. And we've come here today to say to the people of Libya, just as the world stood by you in your struggle to be free, we will now stand with you in your struggle to realize the peace and prosperity that freedom can bring. In this effort, you will have a friend and partner in the United States of America. Today, I can announce that our ambassador is on his way back to Tripoli, and this week, the American flag that was lowered before our embassy was attacked will be raised again over a reopened American embassy. We will work closely with the new UN support mission in Libya and with the nations here today to assist the Libyan people in the hard work ahead. First and most immediately, security. So long as the Libyan people are being threatened, the NATO-led mission to protect them will continue. And those still holding out must understand the old regime is over, and it is time to lay down your arms and join the new Libya. As this happens, the world must also support efforts to secure dangerous weapons, conventional and otherwise, and bring fighters under central civilian control. For without security, democracy and trade and investment cannot flourish. Second, the humanitarian effort. The Transitional National Council has been working quickly to restore water and electricity and food supplies to Tripoli. But for many Libyans, each day is still a struggle to recover from their wounds, reunite with their families, and return to their homes. And even after the guns of war fall silent, the ravages of war will continue. So our efforts to assist its victims must continue. In this, the United Nations will play a key role. And along with our partners, the United States will do our part to help the hungry and the wounded. Third, a democratic transition that is peaceful, inclusive, and just. President Jalil has just reaffirmed the Transitional National Council's commitment to these principles. And the United Nations will play a central role in coordinating international support for this effort. We all know what is needed: a transition that is timely, new laws and a constitution that uphold the rule of law, political parties, and a strong civil society. And for the first time in Libyan history, free and fair elections. True democracy, however, must flow from its citizens. So as Libyans rightly seek justice for past crimes, let it be done in a spirit of reconciliation and not reprisals and violence. As Libyans draw strength from their faith, a religion rooted in peace and tolerance, let there be a rejection of violent extremism which offers nothing but death and destruction. As Libyans rebuild, let those efforts tap the experience of all those with the skills to contribute, including the many Africans in Libya. And as Libyans forge a society that is truly just, let it enshrine the rights and role of women at all levels of society. For we know that the nations that uphold the human rights of all people, especially their women, are ultimately more successful and more prosperous. Which brings me to the final area where the world must stand with Libya, and that is restoring prosperity. For too long, Libya's vast riches were stolen and squandered. Now that wealth must serve its rightful owners, the Libyan people. As sanctions are lifted, as the United States and the international community unfreeze more Libyan assets, and as the country's oil production is restored, the Libyan people deserve a government that is transparent and accountable. And bound by the Libyan students and entrepreneurs who have forged friendships in the United States, we intend to build new partnerships to help unleash Libya's extraordinary potential. Now, none of this will be easy. After decades of iron rule by one man, it will take time to build the institutions needed for a democratic Libya. I'm sure there will be days of frustration. There will be days when progress is slow. There will be days when some begin to wish for the old order and its illusion of stability. And some in the world may ask, can Libya succeed? But if we've learned anything these many months, it is this: don't underestimate the aspirations and the will of the Libyan people. So I want to conclude by speaking directly to the people of Libya. Your task may be new. The journey ahead may be fraught with difficulty, but everything you need to build your future already beats in the heart of your nation. It's the same courage you summoned on that first February day, the same resilience that brought you back out the next day and the next, even as you lost family and friends, and the same unshakable determination with which you liberated Benghazi, broke the siege of Misrata, and have fought through the coastal plains and the western mountains. It's the same unwavering conviction that said there's no turning back. Our sons and daughters deserve to be free. In the days after Tripoli fell, people rejoiced in the streets and pondered the roll ahead, and one of those Libyans said, "We have this chance now to do something good for our country, a chance we have dreamed of for so long." So to the Libyan people, this is your chance. And today the world is saying with one unmistakable voice, we will stand with you as you seize this moment of promise, as you reach for the freedom, the dignity, and the opportunity that you deserve. So congratulations, and thank you very much.
President Obama earlier today in New York, following his meeting with the Libyan Transnational Council president, President Obama remaining in New York for the UN General Assembly. He will speak there tomorrow morning. We'll have live coverage. President Obama speaks at 9:15. Our coverage starts at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and that will be on C-SPAN 3. You can also follow it online at cspan.org. And hey, if you're online already and you're using Twitter, if you want to get regular updates of the C-SPAN schedule, hourly automated tweets, go to C-SPAN, follow C-SPAN Now, and you can stay on track of all of the TV network schedules from C-SPAN. That's C-SPAN Now. U.S. House is in the first of 3 votes. This is a 15-minute vote on extending, reauthorizing the U.S. Parole Commission, and this is a 15-minute vote on the House floor. 2 5-minute votes will follow that. The House is in tomorrow. Tomorrow they'll take up the continuing resolution, federal spending for into the next budget year, with the end of the fiscal year 2011 coming up at the end of this month. They are looking at a temporary measure that will continue federal spending through November the 18th. The House in tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock Eastern, and of course live here on C-SPAN.
On this vote, the yeas are 415, the nays are 0, 2/3 being in the affirmative. The rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the question on the suspending of the rules and passing H.R. 2189, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar number 127, H.R. 2189, a bill to encourage states to report to the Attorney General certain information regarding the deaths of individuals in the custody of law enforcement agencies and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many are in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmatives, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is...
Mr.
For what purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 5-minute vote.
Democrat Bobby Scott's bill would encourage states to report to the Attorney General certain information regarding the deaths of individuals in the custody of law enforcement agencies. 5-minute vote, one more 5-minute vote to follow this on the House floor. I mentioned earlier that the President is in New York for the United Nations meeting, and we will have his comments tomorrow before the General Assembly. 9 o'clock Eastern was when the coverage starts on C-SPAN 3. The President set to speak at 9:15. Earlier today, President Obama met with Afghan President Hamid Karzai, and they mourned the loss of former Afghanistan President Rabbani, the man in charge of the reconciliation efforts there with the Taliban. He was assassinated today by a suicide bomber in Kabul. President Karzai ended his trip to the UN General Assembly early following that attack. Here are the comments of President Obama and President Karzai.
Well, I want to welcome President Karzai and his delegation. We have a lot of important business to do, and I very much appreciate the efforts that he's been making in rebuilding Afghanistan and proceeding on the transition path that will ensure that Afghans are ultimately responsible for their security and their prosperity. We received some tragic news today that President Rabbani, who had been heading up the reconciliation process, was killed in a suicide attack. He was a man who cared deeply about Afghanistan and had been a valued advisor to President Karzai, had made enormous contributions to rebuilding the country. So it is a tragic loss. We want to extend our heartfelt condolences to you, his family, and the people of Afghanistan. But, Mr. President, I think we both believe that despite this incident, we will not be deterred from creating a path whereby Afghans can live in freedom and safety and security and prosperity. And that it is going to be important to continue the efforts to bring all elements of Afghan society together to end what has been a senseless cycle of violence. So very much appreciate your presence here today. I know that you're going to have to leave after our meeting, but we want to give you an opportunity to speak to the press as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your message of condolence and support to myself and to the Afghan people on the very tragic loss and martyrdom of Professor Burhanuddin Rabbani, the chairman of the Afghan Peace Council, the former Afghan president, an Afghan patriot who, as we see, has sacrificed his life for the sake of Afghanistan and for the peace of our country. The mission that he had undertaken was vital, Mr. President, for the Afghan people and for the security of our country and for peace in our country. We will miss him very, very much. I don't think, Mr. President, that we can fill his place easily. He was among the few people in Afghanistan with the distinction that we cannot easily find in societies. A terrible loss. But as you rightly said, this will not deter us from continuing on the path that we have, and we'll definitely succeed. Thank you, Mr. President, for condemning this act of brutality and cowardice against President Rabbani. I would take a message from you to the Afghan people. It's a sad day for us in Afghanistan, but a day of unity and a day of continuity of our efforts. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, very much. Thank you, guys. You guys. Thank you. Thank you.
And Afghan President Karzai earlier today in New York. President Obama will speak tomorrow before the UN General Assembly. We will have coverage of that. President Obama's comments start at 9:15. Our coverage starts at 9 a.m. Eastern. That'll be on C-SPAN 3 and also on cspan.org. On the House floor, this is the second of 3 votes. This is a 5-minute vote, and one more 5-minute vote will follow. That'll be it for recorded votes today. Special order speeches to follow.
And on this vote, the yeas are 390.
Yeah, Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Smith votes aye. Mr. Reyes. Mr. Reyes votes aye. Mr. Lucas. Mr. Lucas votes aye. Mr. Kingston. Off aye, on no for Mr. Kingston.
On this vote, the yeas are 398, the nays are 18. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion is laid on the table. Motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on the motion of the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 2646 as amended, on which the yeas and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 2646, the bill to authorize certain Department of Veterans Affairs major medical facility projects and leases to extend certain expiring provisions of law and to modify certain authorities of the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill as amended? Members will record their votes by electronic device, and this is a 5-minute vote.
This is a suspension bill, one that dealing with Veterans Affairs medical facility projects and leases. Unlike other suspension bills, it takes two-thirds of those present and voting to pass. Tomorrow in the House, they will consider federal spending for the next budget year. Congress has authorized spending through the end of this month, the end of this fiscal year, 2011. Tomorrow, the members will consider a temporary measure, the continuing resolution to keep the government funded through November the 18th. We get an update now from a Capitol Hill reporter. Billy House is a staff writer for National Journal. First item, the House and Senate appear to be on conflicting paths on how to pay for disaster relief. How does that tie into whether the federal government shuts down or not on October 1st?
Well, that dispute on disaster relief is part of the discussion on the short-term CR that would take government, keep government open through November 18th. The end of the fiscal year is September 30th, and the country needs some sort of new bill to keep government operations going beyond then. No budget, of course, has been passed for the fiscal 12-year.
Well, if the House passes a continuing resolution Wednesday and the Senate adds its disaster relief bill to that, what are the prospects in the House then for that amended bill for a final product to pass?
Well, it's important to underscore that all sides are seeking to downplay the notion that we're headed for some sort of showdown or brinksmanship that we saw this spring that could force a government shutdown. But on the other hand, House Republican leaders upset with the notion that their offsets would be taken out by the Senate and the bill would be sent back over to the House. are saying that this would be on Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's shoulders if the government were to shut down, and that, quite frankly, they don't believe there are enough votes on the House floor to pass what Harry Reid wants to do.
Well, parallel to the CR discussions, the Joint Deficit Reduction Committee has another public meeting scheduled for Thursday. Have they come to an agreement on anything yet?
No, and in fact, as we speak, and for much of Tuesday afternoon, they're over at the Library of Congress, huddled in a room still discussing broad parameters of what their talks will move ahead on. The president's stuff certainly puts a lot of new pressure on their plate. And brought a lot more attention on the notion of revenues and tax hike possibilities. But today they're meeting in private, and you're right, Thursday they have a public hearing on that very issue of revenues.
Well, there have been news stories about where these sort of new lines in the sand are being drawn about what should or shouldn't be on the negotiating table. So what do the prospects look like that the 12 members of this committee will reach an agreement?
Well, keep in mind, for this committee to pass anything, it has to be by a majority, and it's evenly divided, 6-6 on partisan lines. So drawing lines in the sand it become even more complicated when you realize if anybody does cross the aisle and does give the other side the one vote it needs to push its ideas across, that person likely won't be doing it alone. There'll have to be two. That makes it seem all the more likely that this committee either A, won't achieve its mission of finding at least $1.2 trillion in savings for the next 10 years, or will barely do that. But the idea of a great grand bargain with some of these great initiatives, various pressure groups, and even President Obama are calling for, seems like a long shot at best.
Billy House covers Congress for National Journal, and you can read his work online at nationaljournal.com. Thanks for that update.
Okay, thank you.
And the House is going to take up the CR tomorrow, that temporary spending that would continue federal spending through November the 18th. The House is in tomorrow, 10 o'clock, for morning hour speeches, and legislative business starts at noon. Also on Thursday, the so-called Super Committee, the Joint Committee on Deficit Reduction, will meet. We're covering that hearing on C-SPAN 3. It gets underway at 10 a.m. Eastern Thursday. Live coverage on C-SPAN 3 and also at cspan.org. This is the last recorded vote of the day of the House. General speeches are next.
On this vote, the yeas are 412, the nays are 3. Two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed. And without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Hear the well. No. The chair will entertain requests for 1 minute. Will the House be in order? Will the House please be in order? For what purpose does the gentleman from Colorado seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the former Ute Mountain Ute tribal leader from the Weemanooch tribe, Ernest House Sr. Over the past 30 years, his influence, dedication, and leadership to the Ute Mountain Ute tribe has grown the tribe's influence in the state of Colorado and in the United States.
Will the House be in order? Will the members please take your conversations off the floor? You may proceed.
Mr. House is the grandson of the Ute Mountain Ute tribe's last hereditary chief, Chief Jack House. In the last years of Chief Jack House's life, Mr. Ernest House Sr. cared for him, learning much about the tribe's history and potential for future plans. Mr. House was first elected to the Ute Mountain Tribal Council in 1979. 3 years later, Mr. House became chairman for the first time, beginning the first of his 4 non-consecutive 4-year terms as chairman for the Ute Mountain Tribe, his last term ending in 2010. As chairman, Mr. House helped the Ute tribe accomplish several projects that widened the tribe's economic and natural resource development. Between 1986 and 88, Mr. House worked to complete 2 major water compacts to provide water throughout the Ute territories. In addition, Mr. House oversaw several building projects, including a tribal health center and casino. In his last term as chairman, Mr. House Sr. focused primarily on tribal safety, widening the tribe's police force from 2 officers to more than 12 officers. On Saturday, September 17, 2011, Mr. House was tragically taken from us after a motorcycle accident outside Cortez, Colorado. Madam Speaker, it is an honor and a privilege to recognize Mr. Ernest House Sr. His leadership and dedication to the Ute tribe has benefited thousands, and he will be greatly missed by the Ute tribe and the state of Colorado. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. From what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise? Seek recognition. Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of the 64% and growing Americans who say, pass the jobs bill. I rise on behalf of those who have sought to get work time and time again. I rise on behalf of the citizens of the state of Texas that has been represented to be a state that has no unemployment, for the 8.3% and growing unemployment individuals in our own state. We are resilient, yes, but working with the United States is important to note that we must do something to restore the opportunities for people to work and restore human dignity. As the President said, we should have one purpose in this House. It should be to work for the American people. We can balance this budget, we can reduce the deficit, but we really can put people to work. Firefighters and teachers and police officers, we can invest in this economy, we can provide education, and we can put Americans back to work. Let's not make ourselves number one. Let's make the American people number one. Pass the jobs bill now.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
To address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in honor of the 25th Annual Hispanic Heritage Month. America is a nation of immigrants, and each immigrant group has added to the richness that is American culture. Hispanics are no different and are an important chapter in the story of America. My parents came to this country from Mexico seeking the American dream. They instilled in me the belief that with hard work and dedication one could create a better future. This is one of the great common denominators of the immigrant experience in America. They raised me to believe that in America, the land of opportunity, if I worked hard every day, I could make a difference for myself and my family. This month gives us the opportunity to celebrate Americans of Hispanic ancestry because they believe in the American dream and have made a difference in their lives and in America by chasing this dream. Just as my parents taught me, I believe that individual freedom and liberty will lead us to a future of economic and social prosperity. Our businesses will grow, our economy will prosper, and America will continue to thrive. Hispanics understand the vitality of small businesses as the single fastest growing segment of small businesses in this country, generating almost $400 billion in annual revenue. I believe that Hispanics will continue to play a vital role in the American economy and society, and that their contributions will only continue to grow. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Ohio seek recognition?
For 1 minute, please.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Yes, Madam Speaker, listening to the prior member talk about small business, I have to say I agree that small business is the biggest engine for job creation in this country, and it was such a pleasure today to join Vice President Joe Biden at Raptite Corporation in Solon, Ohio, and to see the role that government must play when the market isn't fully functioning and when the banks aren't fully lending, and to see the Small Business Administration's 504 loan guarantee program at work creating jobs at this wonderful, wonderful company that now has millions and millions of dollars in sales. When the regular banks weren't working, it was the SBA, Small Business Administration, that we support, some of us support, that was able to draw on the capital that made possible the investment for expansion, and they've hired 5 more people. Imagine if there were 30,000 more companies in America that could do that. With the changes in the Jobs Act that the President is proposing in order to reduce payroll taxes on individuals as well as businesses and the other incentives for small business creation, we can really help lift this economy when she can't lift herself alone. It was a pleasure to be there today. I congratulate Raptite, and to say it was great to celebrate that patriotic spirit of making the market work. Thank you so much, and I yield back my remaining time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, Madam Speaker, 48,000 Americans a year walk out of their doctor's office with the news that they have pulmonary fibrosis, joining the nearly 200,000 Americans already afflicted with this little understood killer. There is no known cure for this lethal lung disease, which takes the life of an American on average every 13 seconds. More than 40,000 individuals annually, roughly the same number as those afflicted with breast cancer. This week is National Pulmonary Fibrosis Awareness Week, and I asked my colleagues to join me in co-sponsoring the Pulmonary Fibrosis Research Enhancement Act. This bipartisan legislation will create a national registry, encourage federal research at the National Institutes of Health, and also create a national action plan so we can better understand this deadly disease and one day discover an effective treatment. Madam Speaker, this effort is really critical to giving hope to the hundreds of thousands of people who live with this debilitating disease. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to remember Senator Charles Percy, who passed away just this last week at the age of 91. Senator Percy served the great state of Illinois for 18 years. His leadership was recognized by his colleagues, and he went on to chair the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He was also beloved by his constituents for his efforts to provide home ownership to low-income families and his work to eliminate corruption in judicial selection in Chicago and ensuring that all judicial nominations were done through a strict advisory process. I'm honored to say that Senator Percy is from the 10th District. He's also a graduate of New Trier High School, as am I. In fact, I remember delivering literature as a child for Senator Percy. Senator Percy's legacy will remain in the hearts and minds of the people of Illinois, always fighting for justice and those without a voice. He is truly going to be missed. My thoughts and prayers are with his family today. I yield back.
Recognition. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is with a great sense of honor and pride that I join Congressman Canseco and my fellow Hispanic American members of Congress in recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month. Hispanic Heritage Month provides us with the opportunity to acknowledge the enormously positive contributions of Hispanic Americans to this diverse nation of ours. Hispanic Americans are some of the most patriotic and hardworking people that America has ever known. Whether serving in the military or creating jobs, the Hispanic community is the embodiment of the American dream and the embodiment of American values, faith in God, devotion to family, and love of country, which is precisely why Hispanic Heritage Month is an entirely appropriate time to commend the Hispanic American community for enriching the diverse fiber of this great nation. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any further requests for 1-minute speeches? The chair lays before the House the following personal requests.
Leaves of absence requested for Mr. Ryan of Wisconsin for today, Ms. Burkle of New York for today, Mr. Reichert of Washington for today and the remainder of the week, and Mr. Baca for today.
Without objection, the requests are granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Ridgel, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks. Now imagine you worked hard and saved a down payment for a house of your own, a down payment on the American dream. Imagine that you found the right place, secured the financing, and happily started your life as a homeowner. Now imagine months later, though, that your house is filled with a putrid, rotten, egg-like odor that just permeates your home, makes your children sick with severe headaches and nosebleeds. Imagine the mounting frustration of the copper coils on your AC unit in your refrigerator corrode, develop leaks, and have to be replaced again and again and again. You ultimately have to move your family into a rental home and find out that the cause of all of this pain and grief is nothing other than defective drywall that fills your home and was imported from China. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, many of my constituents don't have to imagine that nightmare. They're experiencing it and living it out right now. Some of them have been dealing with this issue for more than 2 years without relief. Many are severely financially strained as they continue to have to pay the mortgage on the first home and then go out and find a second residence to live in and pay for both. Some have had their homes foreclosed on. Some have gone into bankruptcy. I've been in these homes. These people are hurting our fellow American citizens. And because our legal system is flawed, the manufacturers of the contaminated drywall that's coming from China, they're not being held accountable for a defective, dangerous product. Even if a judgment is made in favor of the homeowners, it can't be enforced. That is not right. Homeowners insurance and builders insurance is not covering the damages. At the end of the day, who's left holding the bag? It's the owner of the home. This is not the American way. Their finances are devastated. Their credit ratings are ruined. Now, I'm working with a bipartisan group of my colleagues, doing everything we can on the Contaminated Drywall Caucus to forge a better path for our fellow citizens. We've had hearings. We've met with the Consumer Product Safety Commission. We've written letters to the President. We've asked for assistance from the United States Trade Representative. But it's not enough. We must hold the Chinese manufacturers accountable for the defective products they ship to our nation and that fill our American homes. So I call on the committees of jurisdiction to hold hearings, to investigate, and move forward some practical solutions to this problem that is hurting so many of our neighbors. Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Brooks, is recognized for the remainder of the hour.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, according to a 2009 study by the Pew Hispanic Center, 7.8 million illegal aliens hold jobs in America. Madam Speaker, there is a surefire way to create jobs now for American citizens. Evict all illegal aliens from America and immediately open up millions of jobs for unemployed Americans. The eviction of illegal aliens from America has the side benefit of eliminating the abundance of cheap illegal alien labor, which in turn forces blue-collar wages up, thus helping American families afford and pursue the American dream. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, there are those in Washington who chase a different dream, a class warfare nightmare that pits unemployed Americans against illegal aliens in a competition for scarce jobs. The White House and too many members of Congress seek amnesty for millions of illegal aliens, thereby legitimizing criminal conduct and depriving American citizens of job opportunities. Madam Speaker, Congress and the White House must create jobs now for American citizens. We can and must fight for American citizens, not turn our heads the other way, which gives illegal aliens preference over American citizens. But the issue of illegal aliens is greater than just jobs and better incomes for American citizens. Illegal aliens crowd our hospital emergency rooms, delaying treatment for Americans and driving up health care costs because too many illegal aliens don't pay their bills. Too often, illegal aliens get free health care on the backs of already stressed American taxpayers. Illegal aliens also do not produce enough in tax revenue to pay for our schools. Yet illegal alien children overcrowd our schools, thereby reducing the quality of education for American children. Illegal aliens commit horrendous crimes against American citizens, crimes that strain state and federal judicial systems, police and sheriff departments, and prisons that are already overcrowded and in a financial crisis. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, in one of her last Supreme Court opinions, wrote in 2005 in Medellin versus Dretke that, quote, in 2003, over 56,000 non-citizens were held in state prisons. Non-citizens accounted for over 10% of the prison populations in California, New York, and Arizona. As of February 2005, 119 non-citizens from 31 nations were on state death rows. Madam Speaker, so that I am clear, let me emphasize that death row is not just for any kind of murderer. Death row is for murders where victims are tortured or raped before killed. Death row is for murders where multiple citizens are killed. In some, death row is reserved for only the most heinous of murderers. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans are dead today because the United States government has been derelict in its duty to protect American citizens from illegal aliens. For example, in my home of Madison County, Alabama, population roughly 300,000 people, we have had more American citizens killed or murdered by illegal aliens than we have had lost in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. Madam Speaker, let me share with you a personal story that happens to have happened in Huntsville, Alabama, but the truth be told, similar events have likely happened throughout America. On April 17, 2009, a 19-year-old man in my hometown of Huntsville by the name of Tad Mattel was needlessly killed by an illegal alien who has since been convicted of murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison at a cost to Alabama taxpayers well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that we are clear about the illegal alien's conduct, he was drunk. He was wanted for crimes in several states. When he murdered Tad Mattel, he was fleeing the scene of yet another crime. What had Tad Mattel done wrong? Absolutely nothing. Tad Mattel was driving home from a church social with his girlfriend. He was lawfully stopped at an intersection not far from my own home. After everything was said and done, at the end of an illegal aliens crime spree, both Tad Mattel and his girlfriend were subject to force trauma and burned beyond recognition. Both died. Why did this needless crime occur? Why were these two young persons' lives snuffed out? Because our American government has steadfastly failed and refused to protect American citizens from illegal aliens. Madam Speaker, please let me share with you information about Tad Mattel, told in the words of his grieving father, Dan Mattel, and I quote, "Tad Mattel was the first child of Dan and Terry Mattel, born on November 8, 1989, in Florissant, Missouri. Tad was very curious and enjoyed figuring out how things worked. Shortly after his parents installed safety locks on all the cupboards, he figured them out and then taught his little brother how to defeat them. He loved to play outside in the dirt and loved the water. He enjoyed trying different sports. More than anything, however, he loved building and creating. To the frustration of his parents, he would scatter Legos all over the floor as he created ships, starships, and planes. On family vacations, he reveled in the sand as he built sandcastles. When he was 8 years old, he helped his father rebuild an engine on the family truck. At age 9, Tad Mattel and his family moved back to Huntsville, Alabama. Being very social, he quickly made new friends at church and school. In Cub Scouts, he achieved the Arrow of Light Award. In his last year, he won the PAC Pinewood Derby contest. In middle school, Tad joined the Boy Scouts and joined the school band as a percussionist. Tad thoroughly enjoyed making music, and he kept switching between first and second chair with one of his friends. During a scout trip in this period, Tad went caving with his father. By the time he was 13, he was a qualified vertical caver. By age 14, he had achieved a prestigious award among the caving community by completing his vertical 8. In high school, Tad Mattel became heavily involved in the marching and symphonic bands. In his last 2 years, he served as a percussion section leader. Tad also pursued an advanced diploma by taking advanced placement science and math classes. In addition to these activities, he continued serving the community through Boy Scout and church youth group service projects. With his troop, in which he served as a leader, he participated in many different activities. On a Boy Scout trip hike on the Appalachian Trail, Tad helped maintain morale with his goofy sense of humor. Tad is especially remembered for his Julie Andrews impersonation as he skipped down a meadow on Siler Bald wearing a 40-pound backpack while the troop sang The Sound of Music. Tad was very excited when he became old enough to drive. He wanted his own car, so he took a job to earn money for it. He bought a neglected Toyota Supra that cost only $475. He spent the next few months restoring it to running condition. In his junior year of high school, Tad took an auto body collision repair course and completely restored the body of that car. He was so proud on the day he brought it home from the paint booth. He took meticulous care of that car and never abused it because he did not want to destroy all of his hard work. During his senior year of high school, Tad achieved the rank of Eagle Scout. For his Eagle Leadership Service project, he chose to rebuild a boat dock at the Madison County Boat Harbor on the Tennessee River. The original dock was a hazard to users due to warped, splintered, and rotten boards. Tad's leadership resulted in 190 man-hours of volunteer labor that saved the county thousands of dollars. In 2008, Tad graduated from high school with an advanced diploma. His dream was to work in an auto body collision repair and open his own shop. As he worked the following summer and winter, he realized that an education would be necessary to fulfill his dream. Tad applied to the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and with his excellent top 1% ACT score of 32, he was quickly accepted. On April 14, 2009, just 3 days before his murder, Tad received a letter awarding him the UAH Presidential Full Scholarship, which covered all tuition for his mechanical engineering degree. Tad was so excited as he read this letter to his parents that night. Excuse me, Madam Speaker. 3 days later, on April 17, 2009, his father's birthday, Tad attended a church social with his family and girlfriend. After the social, he and his girlfriend headed to her cousin's house to watch a movie. While stopped at a traffic light, Tad's car was rammed by a truck driven by a drunk illegal immigrant who was fleeing from the police. Tad and his girlfriend were killed instantly, which was a blessing because the impact ruptured the gas tank of the car Tad had so meticulously restored and burned the two beyond recognition. There were no skid marks from the drunken driver's vehicle, and accident investigations indicated the truck impacted between 67 and 72 miles per hour, almost double the legal speed limit. The illegal immigrant responsible for this crash had 7 different aliases, had 4 prior DUI arrests, and was wanted by at least 4 other states for misdemeanors and felonies. According to police records, he was to have been deported in 2001. Let me reread that part for emphasis. The illegal immigrant responsible for this crash had 7 different aliases, had 4 prior DUI arrests, and was wanted by at least 4 other states for misdemeanors and felonies. According to police records, he was to have been deported in 2001. Tad left behind a family that still mourns his loss. His brother and sister have dealt with depression, nightmares, and guilt. His mother still deals with days of depression. This loss was completely unnecessary, but occurred because of a failure of the federal government to perform its duty to protect legal citizens' rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As Tad's father, all I ask is that the government perform its constitutional obligations to its citizens to prevent other families from experiencing this same nightmare. End quote from Dan Mattel, Tad's father. Madam Speaker, Tad Mattel's tragic story is one that I could tell here today, one of many that I could tell here today. And his story illustrates so clearly why the federal government must stop being derelict in its duty to ensure the safety and security of American citizens. There are many Tad Mattels in America, each and every one of them victims of crimes that could have been prevented. In that vein, I introduced the Jobs for America Act. It empowers state and local governments to help the federal government by passing laws that identify illegal aliens, deter illegal aliens from entering the United States, apprehend illegal aliens, or encourage or otherwise cause illegal aliens to leave the United States. States aren't asking for another federal handout. They're asking for freedom from federal interference. They're asking for the freedom to protect their citizens' lives and livelihoods. This act ensures that the federal government will appreciate, not punish, states that do the hard work of enforcing our laws. Madam Speaker, when states like Arizona, Alabama, Georgia, and many others act to stop illegal aliens, they should be given letters of appreciation from Washington leaders for doing Washington's job. Instead, they receive lawsuits from the President's Justice Department. That's wrong. And the Justice Department's conduct will only victimize more American citizens. Madam Speaker, my Jobs for Americans Act prevents these wasteful Justice Department lawsuits against states that are only trying to protect their citizens from illegal aliens and the federal government's dereliction of its duties. Today I ask my colleagues to join me in supporting American jobs. The Jobs for America Act does just what it says. It returns jobs to the American people. Its premise is simple. If the federal government won't do its job, it should get out of the way for states and those who will. Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this point, I yield to my good colleague from Alabama.